What if I told you that some of the most financially content people in the world are not millionaires? They are not extreme minimalists sleeping on the floor with 3 possessions. They are not people who gave up coffee or stopped enjoying life. They are ordinary people, living ordinary lives on ordinary incomes, and yet somehow, they feel wealthy. Not just okay, not just getting by, but genuinely, deeply wealthy. Today, we are going to talk about why that is possible, and more importantly, how you can feel that way too, using 3 ancient Japanese philosophies that have quietly shaped an entire culture's relationship with money, desire, and contentment for centuries. These are not hacks. They are not tricks. They are a completely different way of seeing your financial life, and once you see it this way, it is very hard to go back. Let's start with a question. Think about the last time you bought something you really wanted. Maybe it was a piece of clothing, a new gadget, a home item, or something you saw online late at night. Think about how badly you wanted it before you had it, and then think about how you felt about it just 2 weeks later. For most of us, the answer is the same. The wanting was intense, almost electric, and then the moment we had it, that feeling just evaporated. We were already looking at the next thing. That cycle, that invisible treadmill, is exactly what these Japanese philosophies were designed to address. The first concept is called danshari, written with 3 Japanese characters that each carry their own meaning. The first character means to refuse. The second means to discard. The third means to separate. Together, danshari is the philosophy of refusing what you do not need, letting go of what no longer serves you, and gradually loosening your attachment to the desire to own more things in the first place. Now here is what makes danshari different from the usual advice you hear about spending less. Most financial advice treats desire like an enemy to be conquered. It tells you to resist, to be disciplined, to white-knuckle your way past the checkout page. Danshari takes a completely different approach. It does not ask you to fight your desire. It asks you to simply observe it, and then gently, almost tenderly, let it belong to someone else. Here is how that works in practice. You are walking through a store, or scrolling through your phone, and you see something beautiful. A jacket. A lamp. A piece of technology. And you feel that pull, that quiet, magnetic wanting. Instead of immediately suppressing it or immediately giving into it, danshari invites you to pause and say to yourself, that is a beautiful thing. Someone will enjoy that very much. And then you move on. You are not denying the beauty of the object. You are not shaming yourself for wanting it. You are simply choosing not to transfer it into your life. The practical tool that comes out of this philosophy is what we might call the 72-hour pause. When you feel the urge to buy something, write it down. Not in a budget spreadsheet, not in a financial app, just write it down somewhere simple. The item, the price, and the date. And then wait 3 days. That is it. Just wait. What you will discover, over and over again, is that by the time those 3 days are up, something remarkable has happened. The urgency is gone. The craving has simply dissolved on its own, the way a strong emotion does when you give it space instead of feeding it. A large percentage of those items you wrote down, you will never think about again. And the ones that genuinely still matter to you after 72 hours, those are worth considering, because they have passed the test of time. The deeper insight behind danshari is this: we live in a world specifically engineered to keep us in a state of quiet, chronic wanting. Advertisements, social media feeds, the way online stores are designed, all of it is built to make you feel a subtle, persistent sense of incompleteness. Like you are always just one purchase away from the life you really want. Danshari is the antidote to that feeling. It does not try to remove beauty or desire from your life. It simply teaches you that you can admire something without needing to own it. And that distinction, small as it sounds, is enormously powerful. The second philosophy is called Chisoku. And if danshari is about managing desire, Chisoku is about something even deeper. It is about understanding, truly understanding, when you have enough. This might sound obvious. Of course we know when we have enough, right? But think about it honestly. Do you? If your income doubled tomorrow, would you feel rich? Most people say yes, until it actually happens. Because what tends to happen instead is something economists call lifestyle inflation. The bigger paycheck arrives, and somehow, almost automatically, the apartment gets upgraded, the car changes, the restaurants get a little fancier, the wardrobe shifts, and within a year, the feeling of abundance is completely gone. You are earning twice as much and somehow still feel like you are not quite there yet. This is what Chisoku addresses. The word itself translates roughly as knowing sufficiency or understanding in your bones precisely when you have enough. And the philosophy is built on a radical premise: contentment is not a feeling that arrives on its own. It is something you have to define, deliberately and specifically, for yourself. There is a famous stone basin at the Ryoanji Temple in Kyoto. It is centuries old, and it has a phrase carved into it that sits at the very center of Chisoku philosophy. The phrase reads, roughly translated, I alone know contentment. Not the market. Not my neighbor. Not the algorithm showing me what other people are buying. I alone define what enough looks like for my life. The practice that comes from this is deceptively simple, but most people have never actually done it. Sit down and write out, in specific and concrete terms, what enough looks like for you. Not a vague aspiration. A blueprint. How much money in savings would make you feel genuinely secure, not rich, not wealthy, just secure? What size of home would feel comfortable and complete, not impressive? What does your ideal wardrobe actually look like, in terms of real pieces, not an imaginary future version? What does a day in your sufficient life look and feel like from morning to evening? When you do this exercise honestly, something surprising tends to happen. Most people discover that what they actually need to feel content is significantly less than what they have been unconsciously chasing. The finish line was never clearly marked, so they kept running. But once you draw that line yourself, once you say, this is what enough means for me, the chase loses its power. You have given yourself permission to stop. Without Chisoku, every financial goal you hit will just be replaced by a new one. The promotion leads to a desire for a bigger promotion. Paying off one debt creates awareness of another. The new city becomes familiar and ordinary. This is not pessimism, it is just how human psychology works when it has no anchor. Chisoku is that anchor. It is the philosophical act of saying, I have decided what enough is, and I am living inside that definition, and that is enough. The third philosophy is called Shun. And this one might be the most quietly radical of all, because it is about something that most of us in the modern world have almost completely lost touch with. Shun is the practice of living in rhythm with the seasons. In Japan, Shun is most closely associated with food. The idea is that every season brings its own natural abundance, certain vegetables, certain fruits, certain fish, at their peak, their most flavorful, their most nutritious moment. And because these foods are in season and locally plentiful, they are also at their least expensive. The philosophy of Shun says, why fight the season? Why import strawberries in December when you can wait for June and eat them at their absolute finest, for a fraction of the cost? But what makes Shun so interesting for our purposes today is that it extends far beyond food. It is really a philosophy about the cost, financial, physical, and psychological, of fighting against the natural rhythms of life rather than moving with them. Think about this. In early spring, the temperature begins to rise, but it is still cool. The modern response is to immediately crank up the heat in the morning and the air conditioning in the afternoon, spending money to maintain a perfectly artificial climate year-round. The Shun approach is different. Open the window. Put on a light sweater. Let the cool morning air into your home. Notice the particular quality of spring light. These are not deprivations, they are experiences. And they cost nothing. Think about entertainment. Summer evenings are long and warm and alive with sound. Winter evenings are dark early and invite stillness and reading and early sleep. When we stop fighting those natural rhythms, when we stop insisting on the same lifestyle regardless of the season, we find that life becomes less expensive almost automatically. We are not spending energy and money to override nature. We are moving with it. This is the actionable invitation from Shun. Pick just one thing this week to align with the season rather than fight against it. Maybe that means going to a local market and buying whatever produce is actually growing right now in your region. Maybe it means dressing genuinely for the weather instead of maintaining an indoor temperature that makes the outside irrelevant. Maybe it means going to bed a little earlier now that the days are shorter, or spending more time outside because the days are longer. Just one thing. Because what people who practice Shun tend to report is that it does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like relief. Like they stop swimming upstream and simply let the current carry them for a while. The financial dimension of this is real. Seasonal, local foods cost less and taste better. Natural light and airflow cost nothing. Resting when your body wants to rest reduces the stress-driven spending that so many of us fall into, the impulsive purchases, the comfort food, the entertainment we consume not because we want it but because we are too tired and overwhelmed to do anything else. Now let us pull all three of these threads together, because separately they are useful, but together they describe something complete. Dan Shari teaches you to manage desire at the source, not by fighting it, but by watching it and letting it pass. The 72-hour pause becomes a habit, and over time, the quality of what you actually bring into your life improves, because only the things that genuinely matter to you survive the wait. Chisoku teaches you to define your own finish line, to sit down and consciously decide what enough actually means for your specific life, in specific terms, so that lifestyle inflation cannot take hold. You stop running a race with no finish line and start living inside a life you have deliberately chosen. And Shun teaches you to stop fighting the world around you, to stop spending energy and money to maintain an artificial, season-proof, nature-proof existence, and instead to find the extraordinary richness available in simply moving with the rhythms of the world you are already living in. None of these philosophies ask you to become someone you are not. They do not ask you to give up things you love or to make yourself uncomfortable in the name of frugality. What they ask is something much more interesting. They ask you to look more carefully at the life you are already living, and to notice what is already there. The person who practices these three things might earn a modest income. Their bank account might not be impressive by any external measure. But their home contains only things they genuinely love. They know exactly what they need to feel secure. They eat food at the peak of its flavor and they move through their year in conscious rhythm with the world around them. And when you talk to people who live this way, and they exist, in Japan and everywhere else, they do not describe themselves as getting by. They describe themselves as rich. Not wealthy in the way a financial magazine would define it, but rich in the original sense of the word, full, satisfied, complete. That is what financial freedom actually feels like. Not a number. A feeling. A feeling that can be cultivated, deliberately, using ideas that have been quietly available to all of us for centuries. The question is just whether we are ready to try.